Breakfast, everyone. Let's get dangerous.
This is so cool.
I know.
It feels so right.
With Jake Ciely.
He's opening our minds to new ideas. Kill him!
Who is that guy?
Your mama. You just made the list.
Oh, wait, you serious? Let me laugh even harder.
It's all in football.
Sure, we talk about it all the time. Really? No. Burn.
What is up, you ducks? It is All in Football on FTN, and as you can see, hopefully you can see, stop being the thousands of people home and listen to the podcast this time of year. Come watch it. Come back to YouTube. You can see our terrific guest. That's today. That's not Chris Meany. I'll give you a heads up about him in a second, but heads up, this is early reminder, or I guess early, not a reminder. I don't know what you would call it, like a forewarning. Come June, this whole iTunes hates us thing, We're redoing the whole podcast. We're going to have to start from scratch. We're going to ask for your reviews again, ask for your subscribes again. It's going to have a little bit of a different name because iTunes still hates us. And if you try to subscribe, it still crashes on about 50% of you. So that's why things suck right now. But things don't. Actually, you know what? Things do suck for our guest today. It's Ian Hartitz of MLB Fantasy Life, one of the best in the business. Make sure you follow him there. By the way, free newsletter you can always check out. But it sucks for him because we had to let somebody go in our hearts today. Isn't that right, Ian?
Still very much a great day to be great anytime I get to talk to you, Jake. But yes, man, Duke Johnson, the era is over. Was already out of the league. Always kind of funny when these, veteran football players try to play for another year. No one really wants them. And then a year later, it's like, oh, yeah, I decided to retire. But sad day, man. The U's all-time leading rusher, in my opinion, never got that full fair shake out of 3-down roll. We love to make fun of, Hugh Jackson and Bill O'Brien. And apparently we still give him credit for not giving Duke the 3-down roll. So pour one out is right.
Yeah, I poured some water on the floor, and now the dogs are going after the water on the floor. I can make it something. But yeah, at Hartitz, the now Drew Lock fan club, or you still have Cordell Patterson. He's back. He's back to relevant, right?
I hope so, man. I mean, say what you want about Arthur Smith, but he has given my guy CPAT a lot of offensive touches over the years.
Right?
So, Bijan Robinson, fantasy managers, maybe not as excited about it as I was, but yeah, man, new kickoff rules as well. Don't let CPAT get hot.
Real quickly, do you care about those kickoff rules? Because we were talking about when that first happened, and Meany and I was like, I wonder if, I don't know if you remember, 6, 7, 8 years ago when people actually were like, well, my league has return yards. And we're like, what? Why? Like, what are you doing? Why? And it just kind of died. Do you think people start to try and come back to that? Like, and maybe Xavier Worthy pops off. I said, could you imagine if, because these players feel protected, if a team like the Dolphins lets Tyreek Hill and Devon Achane return? Could you imagine if they just let them do that? But anyway, do you think this comes back a little bit? Do you think people will try to get back involved into the return yard leagues?
I don't know that they're going to get back to the fantasy element of it, but I do think returns in normal football games are going to become a much bigger part, man. I was one of those sick enough minds, willing to watch the XFL actually start using this rule a few years ago. And yes, when we saw Kevontae Turpin, absolutely taking over the league on these sorts of returns, there is a more of a wide, open field element to it that it would make sense the XFL is producing bigger returns. But I think this is going to change field position a lot, man. Early season overs might end up being a bargain because teams are no longer going to be starting every single drive at the 25. I think we're finally going to be pushing, into the mid-30s and even 40s side of things there. So, I'm down for Tyreek. I'm down for Achane. Just not Justin freaking Fields, okay? And for those out there trying to say think about the throwback pass possibilities. Think about the Steelers got going to week 15 with Kyle freaking Allen under center because Justin Fields tried some random throwback pass on a kickoff in week 13. Miss me with that, man.
You know what you just made me think of is it's Taysom Hill now. Taysom Hill is going to have a fourth dimension to his game. This is now he just does everything.
That's fine. What? Get your money worth with Taysom, but Justin Fields is still your backup quarterback. All right, that matters.
Here's the thing. I get that, but with Taysom, even if they got the Saints, still wouldn't get their money. To be fair, that's not going to happen. There's no way they can do that. We're going to talk mostly rookies, but there was a piece I did want to talk to you about real quickly. Is I guess breaking news, quote unquote. But it's the time of year that not only we talk rookies. We're getting close. So we're not quite there yet because usually that's around June where what's coming. It's best shape ever time of the year, which is coming. But right before that, we get what is now May is kind of, we got to come up for something like best shape ever for May, but it's, I'm going to be 100%. I'm going to be healthy. I'm going to be ready for week 1. I'm doing great. Everything's ahead of it. And Tank Dell had the injury from last year. There was already concerns about that. And then the gunshot, it was a graze. They said it's not going to really affect him. It's not like Brian Robinson. But I want to go back because they say he should be fine. Yeah, which made me think of it as like, is Tank Dell, in your mind, as of right now, actually, the Texans wide receivers as a whole, are they possibly overrated? Because I don't want to use the cliche as there's only one ball to go around, because that is cliche and it's not always true for what we've seen. But our best case scenario of what we have seen is like the Cincinnati Bengals, where Tyler Boyd is still only a wide receiver 4 with everything going right. Jamar Chase is a wide receiver 1, T. Higgins top 15, but Tyler Boyd checks in as a wide receiver 4 because there is only so much you can give to a third wide receiver. It's now Nico Collins, Stephon Diggs, and Tank Dell. Is Tank Dell the one that's going to fall to the wayside here, or is it going to be we've downgraded all 3 of them and none of them are wide receiver 1? How are you approaching this offseason with the Texans wide receivers?
It's a good question. We've only seen, let me think, there's only been 2 or 3 instances, period. I think 2 instances since 2010 of one offense enabling 3 top 24 fantasy wide receivers in the same year. Demaryius Thomas, Eric Decker, and I believe it was Wes Welker got it done. Also had Brady in the 2020 bucks, but that was kind of weird because AB only played 8 or 9 games with Godwin and Evans. Yeah. So it is very rare. And hey, guess what? If Stroud just makes a second-year leap and is even better than he was in year 1, maybe it is possible. I have a hard time believing any of these 3 guys are going to go, crash too hard. But I think maybe we're a little bit overrating the group as a whole. I mean, this even surprises me, Jake. Like, if you look from week 11 to week 18 last season, final 8 games of the regular season and everything, this offense scored more than 23 points one time. So I know Stroud, was a little bit banged up there down the stretch, but it's not like that we were watching, Patrick Mahomes, the 2018 Chiefs, or just, the 1990 Rams out there in Houston. Their expectations were so low that, yes, when they became an above-average scoring offense, it was fantastic, and we saw Nico and Tank put up some big-time fantasy numbers. That was fantastic. But now these guys aren't being priced as late-round gems anymore. They're being priced as the upside producers that, to be fair, they were last year. We'll see if they can keep it going on in 2024. So I will say I have not been drafting much of Stephon Diggs or, at this point, Nico, at that kind of top 15 price. So if we can get those guys down a little bit closer to that wide receiver 2 borderline, I'd be more invested. I will say regarding Tank's injury, shout out Dr. Jeff Mueller, does fantastic work, as a doctor, and then conveniently for us in the fantasy sphere as well. He is far more convinced that this is more of a, I think it was Jalen Waddle who he referenced. It wasn't Jalen. He basically said this is not the Tony Pollard. Okay, no, he did say return to play comp is Jalen Waddle and not Tony Pollard, because that's the thing. This tightrope ankle surgery, we've kind of seen it affect different players differently, and Jeff Mueller at least is confident that, again, shouldn't be too much of a health issue, at least for Tank. But like you said, man, one football, Dalton Schultz, Joe Mixon in town as well. Crowded offense, but at least there should be, quite a few points being scored.
Yeah, that's what happened, by the way. Like, what was this, like, the last 3 years? What a tightrope, because this tightrope surgery just all of a sudden became like a thing, like the past 2 or 3, like the pandemic. That's the biggest takeaway from the pandemic. Now we have tightrope surgery that everybody's having.
Dude, and Bowers got it at Georgia last year and came back the same season. It just affects everyone differently too.
I think that's the biggest point there, is what you just said, is affects everybody differently. All right, so I over on The Athletic, not to pimp my own stuff here, but my custom projections came out today. So I'm going to kind of phrase it to you in a question. So the reason I have this, and it's a spreadsheet, and everybody can go in there and be like, you know what? I think Malik Neighbors is going to have a 30% target share. You're dumb, Jake. I'll change that. And when you change that, you can see what happens to the rankings. So I'm going to kind of present it this way. I'm going to tell you what the projections kind of came out as wide receiver 1, 2, and 3 for this team, and you tell me in your heart if you feel like this is fair or you would change any of it. And I think that's the better way to look, like, what would you change? So right now, to give you an idea, I actually have the target share between Diggs, Collins, and Tank Dell. It's actually, do you want the numbers or do you want the target share? Which would you like? I'll do both.
Give me the total targets.
The total targets. Okay. 125 for Diggs, 113 for Collins, 101 for Tank Dell. Do you think that sounds like a fair season?
Yeah, I guess my only question is, why are we still giving Diggs the benefit of the doubt over Nico when age, when 2023, when familiarity is all siding with Nico? And I know it's not just you doing it. I've probably just kind of done it without fully grinding, and got to start making these decisions when you get into the projections weed. So, kudos to you for getting those out in May. But that'd be my only thing, man. Like, we have 8-9 games, now not a ton, but still 8-9 games of evidence of Diggs really falling off a bit of a cliff, man. There wasn't an injury there. He had all the targets in the world. And my God, Khalil Shakur was outproducing him down the stretch of last season. So
that's my boy.
That's my only thing, because Nico Collins last year, north of 3 yards per route run. I mean, the yards after catch stuff was phenomenal. I do think we could be looking at this, come week 7 and week 8 going, why did we trust a veteran wide receiver who just forced his way out of Buffalo over Nico Collins?
I think that's a fair point. And this is why I wanted to do it, is just to kind of give you an idea. So, boom. Let's reverse those. I'll tell you what that is. As of right now, what that would do for my rankings, that puts Diggs at 19 or 17 and Collins at 19. I'm just going to flip that 2 percentage points. I'm just going to flip the 2 percentage points because that's what it gives. It was 21% and 19% to give you an idea of the effect and where we can get these. Let's see. Where do we end up here? So that pushes Diggs down to... outside, he ends up as a fringe wide receiver too. Tank Dell's at 32, by the way, and that pushes Nico Collins. Wow. Nico Collins ended up wide receiver 10 in front of Brandon Ayuk, to give you an idea of that. And you're maybe not wrong. I'm not going to say I'm right, you're wrong. That's right. Probably one of the ones I'm struggling the most with is you just said, is it half of the season and that's what we should pay attention to? That's the fall off. Do we look at the entire career? Maybe part of it was frustration. Maybe it was the Joe Brady changed the system, and this whole offense was in flux half of the year last year. We saw it the up and down and what happened with the passing game in the backfield and Kincaid and I don't know. So it's tough. I'm not saying I'm right, you're wrong, or anything like that, but it is definitely a tough call. Something we're going to have to digest a lot of in this offseason. All right. So speaking of digesting, to go back to kind of similar with this whole my injury's fine or whatever. We also, because the draft just happened, a lot of what we're going to talk about today is also, hey, this player is going to do this, and this player is going to do this. And also, if you remember this time last year, Mr. Duke Johnson fan club, do you remember this time last year who was the 5th running back on the Atlanta Falcons depth chart? Do you remember right now this time? It's very easy.
He was always 3rd.
No, it was very easy. It was who they drafted. This time last year, their 5th running back was Bijan Robinson. They put
yes. You mean the preseason?
Yes. Right. And that's why I'm saying this, is because I want to put this into context of how nonsense some of these things in May are. So I even tripped you up on that one. So this is where I'm going with it.
Avery Williams. I was like, what are you doing?
Avery Williams was in front of him. We all remember that. So Jonathon Brooks is getting talked up about being used in the passing game. So here, I'm going to come from the hesitant side, and maybe you're with me on this, or maybe you're going to tell me to feel better about it. But I'm coming from the side of, this is what I said about Jonathon Brooks after the draft. I said he could be Cam Akers' rookie season before everybody goes crazy, because no, Cam Akers is disappointing. I understand. So chill out for a second. I'm saying Cam Akers' rookie season. Remember his rookie season. This is what we got excited for. December, and just heading into December, he was nuts. He was a top 10 running back. Yeah. It took a lot of time. And I was saying, I think that's what the Panthers are doing. They're not a contender this year. Maybe they shock us. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm going to say safely, I feel like they're not a contender. Not a contender this year. You're drafting an elite running back if we assume he can get back to 100% coming off a massive injury. You still have Miles Sanders. That's a disappointment. Let's be clear. Chuba Hubbard was great in replacing him. I guess great is contextualized when you look at how bad Sanders was. But they have options, so you can bring Brooks along slowly and not force the issue. And now they're talking about him in the passing game. Where are you on Jonathon Brooks? Are you with me that you're going to have to be patient? Do you think that they're going to use him in the passing game and he can be an RB3, and they're going to use him right out of the gate so he will have value, and that's the upside of the second half of the season? So basically, what's your opinion on Brooks in drafts as of right now?
I do love, and you kind of hinted at it before, how every running back has 3-down capabilities in May, and then all of a sudden September rolls around, things getting complicated. Because I remember hearing the Panthers conversation where they were talking to Miles Sanders this time last year about, he used to be a 50-catch guy. Why can't we get back to that? Because times have changed in the 5 years between then. So I will say with Jonathon Brooks, I'm looking at Underdog Fantasy right now, early ADP, but still probably the best we got. RB 27 going pick 94 off the board, probably will be higher, in non-wide receiver heavy leagues like Underdog. But I think that price is about right for a guy entering an offense with a head coach who has proven willing to actually feature a workhorse running back more than just about anyone else in the year 2024. So Dave Canales, I know he's understandably gotten most of credit for being this QB whisperer over the years and reinventing Geno Smith and Baker Mayfield, but he gave Rachaad White 336 touches last year. That was more than anyone not named Christian McCaffrey. So with Jonathon Brooks, again, getting that top tier draft capital, it does seem like Miles Sanders is a big time cut or trade candidate. And after that, okay, we just have Chuba Hubbard, who was a career backup before Sanders was so bad last year that he was forced into action. Not like Chuba exactly ran away with that job anyway, as we can see with this impact. So ideally, PFF's ranking 29th ranked offensive line, going to take a nice step forward. They gave Robert Hunt $100 million in free agency and also Damian Lewis $53 million. So maybe not the sexiest overall offseason overhaul. I mean, Deontay Johnson, Xavier Leggett, you would have liked to potentially get a bit higher firepower, for Bryce Young in terms of the pass catching game. But at least in terms of them running the football, man, does seem like that Brooks is going to have that workhorse role we're looking for and hopefully a bit more efficiency, trying to go between the tackles. So, can he actually be this, top tier, top 10, top 12 RB1 from the get-go? I don't know, but he's not being priced that way. So I'm feeling pretty good about his upside too, potentially get there. So we'll see where the injury thing heads. I know Ian Rappaport has been on record saying, he could be cleared by July, definitely by training camp. From what I've read from the doctors too, at a minimum, this seems more like, the Breece Hall sort of injury from last year where not ideal and we could see him eased into it. But by the time October comes around, maybe not even, having to wait till the second half, I think Brooks will be good to go. And I think accordingly, he'll be a, nice positive there on your fantasy roster.
All right, then let's play Would You Rather then. So let's say you're drafting as of right now. I'll give you two veterans and then versus Jonathon Brooks. So now, the return of the eater, Zeke, or Jonathon Brooks if you're drafting right now.
You want to give me three? We can do F, Marry, Kill.
No, because it's my show. We can do that. I'll save that for later on. You'll take Jonathon Brooks over Zeke? All right. How about, and then they'll give you another toss-up, how about another vet? How about this team that's going to run the ball 8 trillion times, possibly? Gus Edwards or Jonathon Brooks?
I am killing Gus Edwards. I am marrying Jonathon Brooks.
Okay. One more. Would you rather be able to bring Duke Johnson back to the NFL or mute every single person trying to send you free picks? You can't believe you're following this account on Twitter that's going to tell you how to win and bet and everything. Which would you rather be able to do?
I'm going to slightly lean towards the Duke Johnson thing. I will say, Jake, this is the only people I block out there. I might hit you with a mute if you're annoying me, but come on, Elon, get these bots together, please.
Every time, it's within seconds too. I'm like, I tweeted something, the response. I'm like, I know what the response is. It's can't believe they're giving away these picks for free.
Dude, and I really try, especially when I'm sending a data tweet or something I've been thinking of. I want to see people's responses early. I'm not going to look at every mention over, a week-long period, so I always end up seeing those damn bots as well. Or God forbid, you look at who knows what they're sending there in, the bad comment area. And then all of a sudden someone looks over your shoulder. I swear, honey, I wasn't trying to look at this.
It's better in my DMs. I'm like, oh, what? No, that wasn't trying to focus on that one. All right, let's get back to running backs. I'm going to throw out a group here and kind of phrase this a little differently. So we had some, whether you were on this or not, but either tier 1, tier 2 running backs heading into the draft of Trey Benson, Marshawn Lloyd. By the way, Marshawn Lloyd getting talked up right now, possibly getting more work than people expect, which wouldn't be me because I actually think he's going to be number 2. I think A.J. Dillon automatically number 3. But anyway, Benson, Lloyd, Braylon Allen, who's clearly backing up Breece Hall, but a big body behind him, and Blake Corum backing up smaller Kyren Williams. And we know the appeal of Sean McVay in a running back. And if something happens to Kyren, of those 4, who caught your eye the most? Because Benson, James Conner's never played a full season. Lloyd is behind potentially an injury, but also looks like he's number 2 as today. Like I said, Allen behind Breece Hall could have a huge workload, or Corum, who could have the workload even without an injury. So of those 4, who's your most fondness of? Who replaces Duke Johnson in your heart? How about that?
Well, here's the thing with that. Marshawn Lloyd, your guy, and someone that Dane Brugler said reminded him of a, thicker Duke Johnson coming out of Miami. So in terms of direct Duke Johnson comps, I don't know how we can't go with Marshawn Lloyd, but I do think I'll have to go ahead and rank Trey Benson the highest. I mean, I do know there were some people, NBC Sports, Eric Froton, shout out, had Trey Benson as his original RB1 coming out. So certainly the Brooks ACL injury, had something to do with that. But with Benson, I mean, one thing that I've tried to, catch myself on with running backs over the years, Jake, is just, can this running back, if he gets a chance at the 3-down role, handle it and run with it? Because as much as, in 2022, I could find 10 reasons why Ramondre Stevenson wasn't going to get a chance to have that role, he got it. And then the dude ended up making, great things happen with it. So with, Benson having that 6 foot, 216-pound frame, with the speed, with the pass catching ability, I mean, there really is room for him to be a flex with benefits fantasy option from the beginning, because as much as James Conner should continue to be the lead dog there, even down the stretch of last year, once they kind of have Michael Carter, became more of a 60-40 split as opposed to, the 80-20 split that we've seen Connor have at various points of his, tenure in Arizona. So as you said, certainly not a model of great health, although he still usually does get out there and give us, 13 or so games. I do think Benson is one of these guys who, more of a low-end RB3, not thrilled about starting him as long as Connor's healthy, but God forbid anything happens, that's when we're firing up Benson, as potentially an RB1, overnight. So number 2 would be Blake Corum for a similar sentiment. Don't think we're getting the same sort of flex appeal, but then again, all-time leading rushing touchdown scorer in the, University of Michigan history. Hate what the dude was doing to my Buckeyes over these past few, Thanksgiving Saturdays, but gotta give some respect where it's due. So with Corum, again, maybe he does carve out that short yardage goal line role. We didn't see as much, pass catching chops out of him, kind of got the smaller arms with that. So not as sure about him getting the flex thing, but hey, you said it, Sean McVay loves him some running backs. And last year, only CMC and Kyron Williams had north of 20 expected PPR points per game. And I do think if something happened to Kyron, Blake would be the next man up pretty much immediately. So love Corum where he's going right now in drafts, but slight, nod to Benson again for, I think, higher every week possibility.
I think something you kind of threw in there too is what I think there's conflicting excitement in the fact of people's minds that they want to be, because you said Kyron Williams in there. By the way, I don't think a lot of people realize, I forget if it's week 12 or 11, but somewhere right around there, Kyron Williams actually stepped in front of Christian McCaffrey in points per game, not even just total points. It was 0.1. He was just, it's neck and neck as close as you can get. It was basically the difference between CMC and Saquon Barkley's rookie year. But that production was where he was because of the workload. This guy, you'll remember this, Ian, is like the lines in Vegas were 19.5 rushing attempts, and he was smashing the over. Like, that doesn't happen these days. But the obvious concern, and why I'm kind of with you on Corum, and I said, you said you don't like him either. I'm not an Ohio State fan. I like a lot of players that came from there. Huge Stroud fan. That's when I jumped to the Texans when they drafted him. But I am a Notre Dame college fan, so I also hate Michigan just because of, they don't actually really play much anymore. But I do have this hate. And that, for whatever reason, people want to try to explain it. I can't. I didn't watch college sports, period, until I moved to Virginia at 8 years old. My cousin was a Notre Dame football and UNC basketball fan. That's how I became Notre Dame football and UNC basketball. I know it makes zero sense, but he was also a Bulls fan through the Jordan days and all the way up for the much older than I am. But that's how that. And I also hate Michigan in basketball because of UNC back in the day also. So there's how you go. I'm with you. I hate some Michigan, but I can like Blake Corum as much as you do. All right, let's get to the next level of running backs here. And I kind of threw these 4 together because you have 2 potential timeshare opportunities, whether or not you agree with them. But that's why I'm asking you. Bucky Irvin and Ray Davis, they could potentially be in timeshares from day one. And then we have 2 late round sleepers, like everybody, there's sleepers. People are already talking about these 2. One is Kamani Vidal because of where he ended up in the Chargers and the opportunity. What if he ends up being the guy? Kind of feels almost like, oh, by the way, that team that, Greg Roman used to coach for the Ravens. It's always the third guy that we want. It's never the first 2. It's the third guy. And then Tyrone Tracy ended up on the Giants. Some comparisons to Antonio Gibson, that type of fact. But a backfield that's kind of open for the taking, despite the fact that Singletary is the lead. There's some opportunities to split with him. And we've seen Singletary struggle at times too. Anyway, those are your options. Irving, Davis, Vidal, and Tracy. Do you have a favorite from that group?
Probably Ray Davis at this point. I mean, just awesome story with the dude, 13 or 14 brothers and sisters and what he had to go up through. So yeah, had, a bit of an extended tenure in college, but at this point, looking at all of these guys with Kamani and Tracy, I mean, yeah, they'd lasted until day 3 for a reason. And accordingly, we need to, I think, try to peel back that onion and look more so at the landing spot. And then also, again, can they be a theoretical 3-down running back? And with Ray Davis, man, again, bulkier guy, and just looking in terms of what running backs had the most fantasy points from only receiving production last year, it was Bucky Irving number 1 and Ray Davis number 2. Wolf Shipley was the only other player even close, honestly. So again, those are the 3 really guys I do think I will be prioritizing that went on day 3. I prefer Davis over Bucky because I'm just a little more confident in Rachaad White's ability to keep control of that Tampa Bay backfield relative to what James Cook did in Buffalo. So honestly, I'm a little surprised that, Cook is still getting streamed up as pretty much a top 12 RB at this point, because as great as that 4 or 5 week stretch was last year, I mean, didn't exactly keep it going down the stretch. And now he has more pass game competition in the form of Davis relative to what he was dealing with Latavius Murray and Damian Harris. So guess what? Josh Allen, he is the short yardage and goal line back in Buffalo, just like Jalen Hurts is in Philly. So I'm not as convinced in that, RB1 role actually being as fantasy friendly in Buffalo and in Philly as it is in other offenses that, again, don't have as much of a dual threat quarterback. So great real life offenses, but for our fantasy running backs, we're certainly prefer somewhere else, like a Detroit or even like an Atlanta with a quarterback that's going to be dumping the ball down far more often. So give me Ray over the rest. In terms of the later round sleepers, I'm leaning towards Kamani a little bit over Tyron Tracy. Maybe I've just been hurt too much by Gibson, over the years, Jake, because he is someone I keep going back to the well with.
The Giants offense.
Hey, yeah, that too. I don't hate Gibson though right now as the handcuff to Stevenson in New England. Right? I will say that. But with Tracy, I've seen the numbers at Purdue. That was a fun time. But if you do look at him objectively, we're still talking about a 24-year-old late 5th round pick that is going to a depth chart with a clear-cut RB1. I don't know what Devin Singletary did to everyone's family over the years, but people refuse to accept that this dude is a good, solid running back. He just got more guaranteed money than Derek freaking Henry on the open market. He's reuniting with Brian Dable, who was his former OC in Buffalo. And sorry, Giants fans, pull up the career numbers between Singletary and Saquon. I understand more defensive attention was on Saquon and accordingly higher percentage of rushes with, A-plus defenders in the box. But look at most run blocking stats. You're not going to see that big of a difference between the Giants and Bills over the last half decade. And guess what? Singletary better in just about everything. So that's one way of saying, too, I'm pretty high on a Devin Singletary where he's going right now outside the top 100 overall picks. But, yeah, man, I just think, hey, if Singletary gets banged up, could Tracy go ahead and rise up? Absolutely. But I think Kamani Vidal, going up against, again, a sadly hobbled J.K. Dobbins coming off the Achilles, and Gus Edwards, who we had never seen, maintain, never had a chance to be fair, but never been outside of a very cushy offensive environment with Lamar Jackson and that typically badass Ravens offensive line. I think Kamani has a better chance of seizing that RB1 role, or at least a usable role. As you said, always need the number 3 in the hardball backfield. Tracy's someone where, yeah, good enough handcuff, but I'd be surprised if we see him carve out, a meaningful fantasy role really without an injury to Singletary.
So if you're watching, I agree with a lot of what Ian's saying, but I was smiling because it made me think of something here, because you wanted to play blank, marry, kill. And there's you just made me think. I'm going to give you one. And it's Buffalo Bills related. It's very blank, marry, kill, 2 former Bills and a current. James Cook, Zach Moss, Devin Singletary. Blank, marry, kill. There you go. I knew it wasn't going to be that easy for you either.
Okay. I am going to...
Just for 2024, to be clear.
Just for 2024. Ooh, that's a good one. I'm going to have to marry James Cook still. Even if I don't think he should be top 12, I'd still have a hard time putting him outside the top 20. Remains the lead back, 50-plus, catch upside. I hate when I have to try to be well, if he didn't drop those touchdowns, all of a sudden his numbers would be better, because he did. And that kind of tells you he's not performing great, but was a lot of that last year for Cook as well. So I'll still marry Cook. I will date Devin Singletary over Zach Moss. It was really fun last year with Moss doing his thing. I've seen the rushing yards, over expectation carry and stuff going on there. But, still got Chase Brown in that backfield. I do think Travion Williams could be there. It's not like the Bengals signed up to give Zach Moss a ton of money. Would it really be that surprising if he somehow, isn't able to seize this 3-down role in training camp? I do not think so. So, yeah, shotgun heavy run scheme. Moss had a nice yards per carry in that last year. But for me, the money and just the draft capital, everything about Singletary with the Giants and Cook with the Bills says they're going to be, I think, featured, or the franchises have more reason to feature them more so than the Bengals and Moss.
Yeah, I think the more shocking thing would be if Zach Moss played 17 games. That would be the more shocking part of it. All right, you know what? I'll give you one more. I'm going to spin this differently as we head into this next discussion here, because there's, it's kind of, you know what? I'll give you, it's like a super veteran, kind of someone that's close to it, or a rookie that we talked about, Jonathon Books, before. You wanted to do this with Jonathon Books, so now we're going to do it. We're going to do the blank, marry, kill with Jonathon Books, but I'm going to throw in two names. One is with now my Houston Texans, who have been for the by the way, everybody's welcome. There's still plenty of room on this bandwagon that I jumped on 2 years ago. Like the reason, by the way, Ian, I jumped on first of all, I'm done with the Giants. I'm still done with the Giants. They've still done nothing for me to think that I want to come back around. But I was like, you know what? Nobody likes the Texans. They stink. People in Texas don't even like the Texans because they had the Cowboys forever. Maybe only Houston people. But I was like, let's go to this team. Then they drafted CJ Stroud. I was like, this is fun. This is like, at least I'll enjoy football again. And I have. And now look how great they are, and potentially. So I say all that to say this. Veteran Joe Mixon, somewhat veteran, but only his second year, Zamir White, or Jonathon Books. There you go. Joe Mixon, Zamir White, Jonathon Books, blank, marry, kill. I feel like they're all in a similar discussion possibly this year.
It is wild, Zamir White going on year 3. Like, this dude didn't have a game with more than 5 touches until week 15 last season. So, yeah, it was a fun 4 games there. But it's not a 1-for-1 scenario, but I do want to be careful, Jake, because over the years I've been burnt on looking at these end of season stretches from players on teams that really had nothing to play for at this point. And, sometimes you do get a sign of someone balling out in the future. And other times you get 2022, Cam Akers and what he proceeded to do after that. Sure. So I would be having to kill, I think, Zamir White in this equation. Now, big time winner coming out of the draft. I mean, yes. Alexander Madison and Dylan Lobb is his main competition. I get it, but just this offense as a whole, we still have the Gardner Minshew, Aiden O'Connell experience. And yeah, not saying they're necessarily going to be worse than what we're dealing with in Carolina, but I just don't see the same upgrades or the fantasy-friendly environment for Zamir without the potential for him to really get that pass-down role. I'm just, a little bit, just hesitant about trying to rush him up and put him ahead of the RB1 in the class and Jonathon Books. We've already talked about plenty. And then also Joe Mixon, who for me, I'm sure I'll be curious where he ended up in your projections, because I think Mixon is one of these guys where, you rank him in one area, or at least, people want to kind of think of him as this RB2. But then if you actually start going through every single depth chart, you could be hard pressed to find many running backs out there, projecting to see more touches out there. So for me, Mixon's the easy pick here. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Give it a chance. Where do you think he checked in?
I'd be surprised if he's not top 10. I'll go RB8.
RB8. On the nose, Ian. Look at that. Sandwich between Kyron and Gibbs. There you go. At very small, very slim margin, by the way. It's 221, 220, and 217 to give you how close they are. But RB8, you hit it on the nose. I'm just like, I can't believe you nailed that one.
There's like a 3-round gap between him and Josh Jacobs right now, and I have no idea why. Mixon, once he got traded to the Texans, signed a 3-year, $27 million extension. He's getting more guaranteed money from the Texans than what Jacobs is getting with the Packers. We have 2 really inefficient rushers that are entering really good offenses that have given them financially enough backing for us to believe they're both going to be workhorse running backs. So why is Jacobs going around 2 and 3 and Mixon's going in freaking round 5, man? So I want to be careful. I know last year I got really hooked on, finding these arbitrage versions of players. And yeah, I'll take value. Like, I'm not, because my point here is, as much as Mixon could be a great value in round 5, that doesn't necessarily mean Jacobs is a bad value in round 2 or 3. I think Jacobs is just more accurately priced than what Mixon is. So this isn't my way of saying I'm out on Jacobs or anything, but Saquon Barkley, Josh Jacobs, Rashad White, Joe Mixon, Look at these guys' efficiency numbers last year on the ground. They were all bad. But guess what? Yards per carry in fantasy football really doesn't matter as much as we think it does. And it just seems like we're still holding the inefficiency against Mixon far more than these other players. So, dude, he's been healthy, capable of holding on to the workhorse role in recent years. I almost wonder if some of the off-the-field questions that impacted his ADP last season are just, for whatever reason, almost impacting what's going on right now. So, for me, man, like I did a draft yesterday on DraftKings Best Ball. I went wide receivers, 3 stub wide receivers in the first 3 rounds, like Garrett Wilson, Drake London, and then someone else in round 3. And then I got Joe Mixon and Travis Etienne, and then Joe Mixon in rounds 4 and 5. And again, when you have these handful of guys, Jacobs, Mixon, Etienne, think about how we're going to be ranking them in week 4, week 5, when they're all expecting to see 20-plus touches. And guess what? The Texans and Jaguars happen to be pretty damn good offenses, just like the Packers as well. I think there's a unique chance right now to get these workhorse running backs in round 4 and round 5 that probably should be going closer to round 2.
I hate to tell you something, though, Ian, is that team is guaranteed to win nothing because it looks so amazing right now. Those are the teams that do nothing. Like that team is like freaking loaded. Like to get what you did with Etienne and Mixon, and then what's going to happen. You're going to be like, how did this team finish like 78th place? Like what the hell happened here? By the way, to Ian's point, RB4 last year, 3.8 yards per carry, Travis Etienne. RB6 last year, 3.6 yards per carry, Rachaad White. Yards per carry doesn't matter. As Ian pointed out, we want that volume. Is what we love. Talk a few wide receivers before we get out of here. The big 4-ish, because we have the big 3. We know who the big 3 are. Adunze ended up in an unfortunate spot with like the Jackson Smith and Jigba situation, but that's not what we're talking about. We've done that at depth. Everybody's done it ad nauseum. I want to talk about Xavier Worthy, Lad McConkey, who's getting a lot of buzz. Like, I love the buzz before the draft. I'm a big McConkey fan, and he's getting even more now because of where he is. Opportunity. Keon Coleman. Opportunity, but also probably the best person on social media right now, which, by the way, go back to what you were saying about the running back situation, everything like this. Is Ray Davis and Keon Coleman, did the Bills just go in and be like, hey, we're going to win the draft socially? Like that's what their goal was? But anyway.
I don't hate it.
Yeah, Keon Coleman. And then what I think is one of probably... I say he deserves to be in this group, but probably the most underrated, in my opinion, of this group is Brian Thomas, who I said is immediately going to put up Calvin Ridley 2023 numbers, as in 1,006 touchdowns. Like, that's not that hard for Brian Thomas. I think he's the number 2. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you love somebody else. So Worthy, McConkey, Keon Coleman, feels like a lot of people would pick him as of today. And Brian Thomas, who do you like from those 4?
No, it's funny with Ridley. I remember tweeting after the season. I was like, this dude just had the worst 1,000-yard, 8-touchdown season ever, which is, kind of an oxymoron.
Like, no.
Right? Well, and the problem is, man, I put the video together in January. I still see it in my mentions every so often with just Jaguars fans sticking up for T-Law. The amount of near-miss touchdowns that Ridley and Zay Jones had last year from either drops or more frequently only getting 1 foot down in bounds, absolutely unreal, man. We're talking about legit 8 or 9 times. I put a 2-minute video together. You guys can check that out later. But for that reason, man, I'm going with Brian Thomas Jr. He was my wide receiver 4 coming into this. I mean, you just don't see too many guys with, 6'3", 209 with 4.3 speed. Xavier Worthy, he's fast, and that's great. Worthy is, carrying about 40 fewer pounds than Thomas, and he was only 0.01 seconds faster in his opening 10-yard split. So I think Thomas Jr.'s worst case scenario is being as this, field stretcher in the sort of same vein as his new teammate, Gabe Davis, maybe a DJ Chark. That's his low end of things. And remember, DJ Chark has a 1,000-yard, 8-touchdown season to his name back in the day as well. So I do not mean that as an insult, but yeah, man, it's a unique situation where we had a bunch of offenses with a good quarterback and also with, plenty of available targets for them. So Thomas obviously losing Ridley and now Zay Jones, Keon Coleman in a Bills offense that had the most, vacated wide receiver targets and air yards, McConkey with the Chargers, and even Worthy with the Chiefs, where who knows how long Rashee Rice is going to end up being suspended over there. So ultimately, again, I will take Thomas. I think we got the draft capital slightly on our side, and just overall, based on what we knew before the draft, he was my, wide receiver 4 at the top of the tier behind the big 3, as you mentioned. So some of my comps going in the process: Gen Z, Braylon Edwards, upper middle class man's DJ Chark, Christian Watson with functioning hamstrings. But I think my favorite one, man, Martavis Bryant in the nicest way possible. I think that's what we have in Thomas. And to be fair, man, this is kind of the first potential contested catch artist that Lawrence has really had at the NFL level. I mean, he lived on those sort of, well-thrown jump balls at Clemson. Excited to see what he can do this year. Still only like 112 days older than Bo Nix at this point. I think T-Law has that, kind of post-hype breakout this year that we were hoping for last year.
You might even like mine. You want to know what my comp for Brian Thomas was?
Yeah, let's hear it.
Nico Collins. To pull it back.
Yeah, I can see that. Just the bigger body dude with some yak juice. Let's go.
So, and the thing is, so it's funny you said at the top of the tier 2, I actually gave him his own tier of 1.5, like 1.5, nice. 1B, because I said, like, most years he would be tier 1. Like, he just fell into, like, the worst possible draft class for his. Like, I think he's that good. Here's a toss-up. Would you rather have Brian Thomas as the, like, let's say you and I are 100% correct. Brian Thomas is definitively the number 2 for Trevor Lawrence. Would you rather, as of today, have Brian Thomas or the number 1 Malik Neighbors for the Giants?
I still take Neighbors. I think Neighbors could get like 150 targets, and Thomas could just have to.
But they're still coming from Locke and Jones. To be
true,
fair.
But when you look at it, honestly, as much, hey, Drew Lock, that's my freaking dude. So no insults going there. But with Daniel Jones, man, him and Matt Ryan hysterically are the only quarterbacks with a sub 7-yard average target depth over these past 2 years. Look what Dable did his first 2 years with Stephon Diggs, man, 160 plus targets each year. Last 2 seasons have been the last 2 seasons. Giants wide receivers haven't been able to stay healthy. They've just been bad, one quarterback in after another. But I think Neighbors' rookie season is going to look a lot like Jalen Waddle from a few years ago, where we're sadly not going to get, the field stretching component that we know he has, but there's nobody else to get the ball to on this offense.
Unless it's Drew Lock. I actually think Drew Lock would be terrific for fantasy because, let's be honest, Drew Lock has a lot of Jameis Winston to him. Like, just going to start chucking that ball 30 yards downfield. Go get it. And Neighbors should be able to get it. All right. I don't want to keep you too long. I have 2 more quick things. One's a quick toss-up. Well, you can make it as long as you want it to be. And then there's another interesting situation. So the one more tier of wide receivers. You mentioned Leggett. We have Purcell. I think, everybody was hoping that there was going to be a trade, which didn't happen, but this is maybe for the future. It's like this group I want to talk more of like maybe 2024, 25, 26. Let's do not dynasty, but maybe like a 3-year outlook. So Leggett, Purcell, Troy Franklin, Roman Wilson, and Adonai Mitchell, AD Mitchell, whichever way you want to go with it. Who do you think fell into the best landing spot, not just specifically for 2024, but maybe like, hey, let's also remember their name next year in case it doesn't happen this season?
Hard to doubt.
Without trade. You can't play the 49ers traded somebody situation.
Right, that's what I'm saying. So when you extended a couple of years, I'm just assuming Ayuk and Deebo could be there for that long. Going to be gone. Parasol, but pure prospect, I was an AD Mitchell guy. I thought he could have been deserving. Probably my wide receiver 6, before the draft behind Thomas. And then
not to jump on your toes, can I ask you a question legitimately? Here's my biggest question, or my biggest concern about AD Mitchell.
Sure.
Is him giving up on plays. That's my biggest, watching the fact of like when he wasn't involved or like the play broke apart and then he would kind of just stop moving and like that kind of frustrated. And here's the comparison I made. So for years I kept saying Marquise Lee. Remember Marquise Lee? I was like, in college he was so much better than everybody else. He just dominated. But he dominated, if you've watched, lazily, rounded routes, gave up on routes, and you saw what happened. He got to the NFL. Everybody was on his level playing field, and it's like he sucked. And he finally woke up. It took him like 4 years, but he finally woke up. And then unfortunately his career was shortly done after that. But that's a little bit, am I just kind of, do I have too much Marquise Lee in my brain watching Mitchell? Or is it or do I have legitimate, you've watched a lot of them as well. Do I have legitimate concerns?
It's a legitimate concern. I will say you see it pop up, not as often, but Xavier Worthy had a little bit of that too. And, I don't want to put too much stock into Twitter user 946 John or whatever we see out there. But I will say someone brought up an interesting point. I haven't had the time to try to go back and watch every single Texas broadcast, but someone actually put the idea out there that was basically like during the broadcast, one of the Texas coaches was saying that they almost tell the wide receivers on the backside of plays to not worry about running as complete routes because they absolutely know beyond a shadow of the doubt they're not getting the football. Now, you mentioned some extended plays where I'm not saying that was the case every single time out there, but it's just one of those things where I'm not denying Mitchell's done it, but it just – is every other single wide receiver in this class consistently going 100% every route? It feels like this is something that's only really being considered and held against Mitchell at this point. So, you start hearing about the quote unquote off the field issues, which are apparently him having diabetes. Like it's one of the more ridiculous, pre-draft storylines going on out there. So for me, I just see a guy that whether he was at Georgia or at Texas was making big time plays in big time games. And yes, we didn't see, the yards per route numbers or the consistency, from a week to week basis. But on the other hand, if you're not going to be as consistent or have, this dominant target share, it makes sense if it's at schools like Georgia, like Texas, that, were littered with other first round picks in the picture. So with Mitchell, I mean, again, we see so many guys running 4.3s these days. I don't think we give it enough respect when it's from a dude who's 6'2", 205 out here. I mean, fifth best RAS score among 3,188 wide receivers. This dude is a certified freak athlete. I love his ball tracking skills. I think he can be, a more nuanced route runner than he maybe gets credit for. Because again, if you just not to remove all the players' bad plays and bad routes and only focus on the good ones. But again, you see signs of him running these, goal line whip routes and even just some of the fades he was able to do. Like the dude can go out there, and even though he didn't have the world's, best QB play, most unrealized air yards among any Power 5 wide receiver last year, by the way. I mean, Xavier Worthy statistically is the worst deep ball wide receiver in this class. Now, do we actually think that's true? No, I think, Quinn Ewers had a little something to do with it. So with Mitchell, among this group, I think he's the best real life talent. And as much as I do think Michael Pittman will continue to dominate the target share in Indy, hey, I think Alec Pierce, is definitely someone who's more of a wide receiver 4, wide receiver 5 at the NFL level. Mitchell, I think, could provide some sneaky, boomer bust wide receiver 4 type of stuff this year. Maybe he develops into that beast that he, again, at least flashed the ability to be down there at Georgia and Texas.
Yeah, and I'm with you on that. I also think the fit is much better. Alec Pierce a holdover from pre-Anthony Richardson too, so like it's not exactly.
Get him out of here.
Yeah, get
Josh Downs is a dog though. Josh Downs is good.
Last one. This is coming off our last podcast during the draft, and I think I'm gonna ask everybody this because I'm trying to rein in my excitement for Jahan Dotson. I said Jaden Daniels, big winner from where he went, but I'm like, who also is a big winner? Jahan Dotson, because his quarterback will know he exists. He won't forget that he's not there in the second half. Complete and utter failure by Sam Howell. I will say this too, real quickly. Rivera pulled not only Dotson off the field, but he's pulling McLaurin off the field towards the end of the season too. Let's also remember Dax Milne was on the field and we're like, where the heck is Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson? And he's like rolling out like Jamison Crowder and Dax Milne. And we're like, what the hell is happening right now? Anyway, so if I had to tell you today, Luke McCaffrey, definitely a gamer. Obviously, we know athleticism, part of the problem, like for why he was drafted where he was. But if you had to say as of today, is my renewed hope in Jahan Dotson valid, or is McCaffrey going to be a big thorn in his side?
No, I think McCaffrey's there just to take the Curtis Samuel role, and I'm hopeful that Dotson should still have, that typical every down role. Like you're right, there were some annoying, games there, but more weeks than not, we still had that 80-90% route rate going for Dotson. Just shocking to see, the amount of Gabe Davis, sub 25-yard ass games that we had going on for Dotson. Because I'm with you, man. I was so excited about the guy, coming out of his rookie season. The route running chops were just awesome. I know Matt Harmon's, reception perception, saying all the right things about Dotson. And with Howell, I mean, I just thought that we had a potential for a guy to put up some numbers, even if they were going to be a bit, empty out there. So ultimately, I think it was just, we had the sort of volume we wanted, but maybe didn't anticipate enough. The lower touchdown rate and just all the freaking sacks that Howell had to take out there as well. So still number 2 behind us, Scary Terry, of course. Yes. But I think McCaffrey, we'll see more. But this is a guy that's only been playing wide receiver, I think, for 2 or 3 years now. Yeah, one of his birds is Christian McCaffrey. The other one's Max McCaffrey, who never managed to do anything at the NFL level. So, again, don't want to just get too carried away with this, LMC, stuff we got going on here. So we'll see what happens. Not completely ruling the guy out or anything. We can't ignore the day 2 draft capital. But I'm with you, man. I think Jahan Dotson definitely is a, little post-hype bounce-back candidate here because I see McCaffrey slide into that slot and not even being direct competition for Dotson in the first place. So here's hoping Jaden Daniels can be that guy. I mean, honestly, some of the pre-draft stuff on Daniels, I just thought was weird, man. Like, okay, he is really fast out there, but like the Lamar Jackson comps, like Daniels was someone who I thought is a much more pure passer, just in terms of like the first 2 seconds of the play. Like you watch him at LSU, he goes through his progressions. The problem is like once he gets 1, 2, 3 and they're covered, he just puts his head down and runs. I mean, it was something like over 50% of his actual pressure dropbacks didn't even result in a pass because he just took off, put his eyes down, got sacked, whatever. So I'm hopeful again that Dotson can keep that number 2 job. But I'm just a little concerned if the game's a little bit too fast for Daniels at this point. And sadly, we get an offense that's only throwing for 3,500 yards or so.
Yeah, I can see that as well. The funny thing is, so to go to that, I call Daniels the best of Justin Fields and the worst of Justin Fields, although also with a better deep ball, to be clear. Like you have to kind of like add that little part at the end right there, because like some of the games you'll be like, man, like Justin Fields could be a top 5 quarterback. Jaden Daniels could be a top 5 quarterback. And then you watch some games, you're like, that's disgusting. I don't want to ever see that again.
I will say though, too, like one thing sorry to cut you off, but one thing, like, okay, by the end of this year, I mean, Fields is going to be 1 year older than Jaden Daniels. And that's what made this quarterback evaluation so hard, because as much as Daniels, Nix, and Penix were just putting awesome stuff on tape, by the end of it, it was like, okay, now how would I consider Drake May or JJ McCarthy with 3 extra years of college going into this? So I'm rooting for Daniels. He's going to be fantastic in fantasy because he runs the hell out of the ball. But in terms of how this passing game is going to be, I just hope our guy is Terry Freed. I'll take Dotson too, Jake, but more than anything, man, let's get Terry McLaurin a legit QB1 and see what happens.
Let's get him back to at least top 20. We used to remember those days, like wide receiver 18. It was that we would basically combination of the pandemic and NIL, like we'll call it nil-demic. That's why we've got like this. There's a player going into like his 9th year of eligibility. I forget. I saw it.
I like Miami.
Yeah. like how is that even possible? I'm gonna go back to ODU and play some football. I still got my years of eligibility. Now I could actually play for like 7 years now. I'm good.
Never graduate, man.
Never graduate. But please, always follow Ian Hartitz at iHartitz, by the way, over at MA Believe Fantasy Life. What do you got? Tell everybody. This is your pimp yourself room. Like you can marry kill yourself.
Appreciate you, Jake. Always good chatting you up, man. Appreciate your fellow positive presence, over on social media. We can talk about football and have a good time and not be a dickhead. That's what I try to go out there and do. But yeah, MB Fantasy Life, Jake mentioned it, free newsletter. I write the Tuesdays and Fridays, Peter Overset, Dre McFarland, Kendall Valenzuela, big crew we got going on. Love each and every one of them. But yeah, I'm actually getting married in 2 weeks, which is a crazy little life event. So I am just turning out team previews in the meantime. I'm going to start publishing here in just about a week and a half. So exciting times, Jake, trying to still get ready for 2024. But found a woman to take the last name Hartitz. So I'm giving myself a pat in the back for that one.
That's the biggest one. Forget everything else up to this point. That's all that matters. Congratulations on that. We'll be back next week. Again, now it's Tuesdays, and a reminder coming up, you're going to have to refollow the show and all that stuff. So I apologize in advance. But Ian's better than that. So we'll see you next time.